Greetings once again, dear listeners, to another episode of Redemption Meditations. I am Steve. With me, as always, is Lee. Lee, how are you?
Fantabulous, Steve.
And if you're watching this, you may be thinking to yourself, Dana looks different. And that's because he's not even here. We have with us our gifted brother, Ron Boehler. He is our special guest for this episode. And he is going to actually be the focus of our main discussion today. And we're going to hear from him a little bit about how he came to faith, how he came to know the Lord, and how he came specifically to Redemption Bible Church. It's always fascinating to hear someone's tale of what God did in their life and how he moved them to where they are today. So without further ado, Ron, share with us how the Lord has worked in your life and brought you to RBC.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for inviting me.
Thanks for
Absolutely welcome.
Glad to be
it's
here.
Great.
I am not tech savvy, so if it just seems like he's an amateur, well, he is. So there you go.
Us too. So
Us too. Yeah.
You're in good company.
That's right. We're all in this together, Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my journey to Christ, when I look back on it and think about it, which I have been here for quite some time, probably the last 3 or 4 months, I've really been thinking about this, analyzing it, looking at it, because my one desire was to get involved more with the church. So when you start thinking that way, you obviously think of how you got there and where you're moving forward. And it's been just interesting to think back on some of the things. Some things are quite painful, as most people have in their lives, and some things are really encouraging. But the amazing thing is just to see when you're older like me, how you can look back and see how Christ has worked in your life. And that's just a wonderful thing. I don't think too many young people can see that yet. And maybe some can, but when you start to get up in years, you look back and you just see how the pieces just start to fall into place. And you realize it was nothing of your own. It was nothing of your doing. And that's a very comforting and wonderful thing. And it's also the reason for the desire to become more involved in the church. You have this gratefulness and you want to express it by kingdom building. You want to help God's kingdom move forward. And that's been interesting to think about and contemplate and pray about and talk to some other good brothers about, and just trying to move forward in a manner that honors Christ. That's really all you're doing. But my story, in so many ways, I guess you have to go back probably to understand this, to my childhood, the way I was raised and different things, because I didn't want to admit it for such a long time, but I am more like my father than I care to admit. So
Spoken like a true son.
my father was my father, and you're stuck with him. You can't do anything about it. But he was my family was not a godly family. They never went to church. I think honestly, the only time I can remember being in church, probably up to the age of 17 or 18, was once, and it was for somebody's wedding, and I have no idea who these people were. That was my experience with church. For whatever reason, I do remember that my mom would send me to some VBSs, which seems to be the thing to do. But as far as my parents, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, all of my family relations, nobody ever sat a Bible in front of me and say, let me tell you about Jesus. Or nobody ever sat down and just prayed in front of me or anything. So my upbringing was, if you just want to say worldly, that's exactly what it was. And I was basically on my own and carving my own path. So when you realize after reading the scriptures long enough and you've sat in enough church sermons and you've heard enough and you start learning that you realize you're born in sin. Well, I was every bit of that. And it just it's humbling to look back upon and just think about those things. But the power of influence, if I could say one thing outside of my own story, the idea of parents within the church raising their children to be godly children is such a worthy calling, and it is such a needed thing, because I can starkly see the difference between me and kids that love their parents, listen to their parents, and their parents influence them in a way that honors Christ. That is such a stark difference to what I had. So I see the benefits immensely. Now, it doesn't mean kids and parents are perfect, but it's like having a solid platform to stand on to build your life. And that's just a wonderful thing. And it's really inspiring to see a lot of the parents at RBC. I mean, they love their kids, they love the Lord, and it shows.
Yeah.
So in my life, that was just not even a thing. I mean, my dad was a military man. He ran his house like a military. He did the same thing day in and day out. You could set the clock by him. He would leave the same time for work every day. He'd walk in the door the same time every day. Supper had to be on the table at 5:30 every night. If not, there was going to be problems. Lights out
my
around
goodness.
9:30. If not, there was going to be problems. And
man.
that's the way he ran his house. He went to the military as a young man, and he lived it. That was his life. And it's the only way he really understood, I think, how to parent. You do what dad says. And if dad's wrong, you don't talk back to dad. This is dad. So
Whew.
he was quite the character. And his influence on my life was actually, I didn't think was really as great as it was till several years ago, when I really started understanding, well, many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when I really just took a deep dive into the Bible and just really started understanding things. And he influenced me and my brother and unfortunately my mother in ways that was detrimental to all of us. And he also had a drinking problem. He also had anger issues. So you tie that personality into what he embraced, and what he enjoyed was really his autonomy. Leave me alone, let me do my thing, let me have what I want, and we'll get along. But if you mess with that mold, there's problems, and there were consequences. And the older I got, the probably maybe early teens, the rebellious nature just starts to come out. And I wanted this, dad said this, but the rebellious side of me said, no, dad, we're going to crash through that. We're going to butt heads. It's just coming. and that's all we did for years. It was back and forth, just constant fighting and bickering, and to the point to where he was abusive, and just his way of dealing with life in general was just to drink more and more. So it was not a godly upbringing at all. And when you understand God uses people, and God uses the Holy Spirit in conjunction with his word, and those two things come together in your life, that's a powerful thing. And I really didn't really know anything about God. I knew there was a God, but that was it. I mean, you're a worldly person. You're left on your own. There's nobody to explain these things to you. The school certainly isn't going to do it. And
Certainly
so,
not.
no. So you just become a product of whatever. And that's kind of where I was until one day I seen a girl that I was truly attracted to. And I'll let you know, it was my wife now.
Good clarification.
Yes. We've been together since seniors in high school.
Wow. Wow.
So, and she truly was used by God to get to me. And the thing that drove her was her father was a very godly man. He went to church every Sunday. I mean, he was just like my dad, but polar opposite direction in a good way. And he was also interestingly enough, he was my high school government teacher.
Oh man.
So if you can imagine my friends having some fun with that.
I'm sure.
Hey, Ron, what were you and Kathy doing out late last night, right in front of my high school government teacher?
Great.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thanks,
Friends like
guys.
these.
You're real friends.
Yeah.
But that connection with those two people, God used to, I would say, start my process of getting closer to Him. Because the one thing that drew me, obviously, to my wife, I was attracted to her, but her father and the way he ran his family, we're called to be salt and light. And he was that. And I seen it. I seen such a stark difference between a godly family and a family that didn't even know who God was, being mine. And it's just it's an amazing thing that I was very attracted to that. I wanted that. I wanted that stability. I wanted that love between siblings and love between mother and father. And when you seen that expressed right in front of you in such a clear way, and the only thing you could come up with is, well, he goes to church every Sunday. He prays. What's up with this? So you start connecting some dots. So you know the idea of praying in front of your children and having a family time of maybe gathering around the Bible, the scriptures, it pays dividends in such ways that you can't even imagine. And I was an outsider looking in, and I seen it. So that was really my first introduction to church, because it became obvious after a while, me and Kathy dating, that if I want the girl, I'm going to have to go to church. Well,
Guess I'm going to church.
okay. Didn't really want to, but of course, sometimes they fed you well, so that was cool.
Oh yeah,
But
that happens.
But you understand the sinful mindset and the autonomy. I really didn't want anything to do with that. I mean, I'm sitting and listening to some of these sermons, and all I'm hearing is, I can't do this, I can't do that, and you got to obey this, and you got to do this, and I didn't want any of that. So for quite a while, I just played the game because I really wanted the girl. I mean, that's really, honestly, truthfully, that's what it comes down to. And it's sad to say that now, and I'm ashamed of it, but when you understand total depravity, which I was every bit of that, I had no desire for God. I didn't. There was nothing there.
A child of wrath like the rest of mankind, after all.
Yes. And when you read these things as no one chases after God, there's not one, Romans 3. These things just come bellowing in your head because you see it, you believe it. That's what I was. But the real tipping point kind of came when her father, and and I love the man to death, but he knew I was no good for his daughter. And looking back, I don't blame him. Would you guys? I mean, you know? So the plan was to send her 3 hours away to a college that he knew my family, my life, my no financial anything, just me. He knew that I probably couldn't do anything about it. And she went to college and I stayed home with mom and dad. And that was a really sad point in my life, a really sad point in my life. And that went on for quite some time. But that's really when me and dad come to the point to where of kind of no return. I mean, it was coming. He was angry, and I normally wasn't angry, but now I was angry.
Mm.
So I just got tired of him one day, and he was drinking too much, and he come in, and me and mom sitting in the living room, and he crashed into my truck, and he gets out just screaming, and he blamed me for parking in the driveway. I mean,
Oh man.
I was parked in the driveway right where he told me to park.
Where cars
And
are supposed to be parked.
yes. And that was the tipping point because he'd already previously told me that 7 or 8 months ago that by the time I turned 18, I better have plans on being on my own because you're not living under my roof. And that was the point to where the anger and the frustration built up. It all come to a head, and me and dad almost come to blows right out there in the driveway. And that was it. I was done. So it wasn't probably 3 or 4 weeks later that I grabbed what little things I had, threw it in a suitcase, $200 in my pocket, a broken down pickup truck, and I started heading this direction. That's how we ended up here. Kathy was going to school at High Northern in Ada, and I ended up in Lima.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I got enrolled in a tech school in Lima just to get a roof over my head and took out, just signed on the dotted line. I don't care. Just give me a place to stay. And started taking some classes. And that lasted for about almost a year, but it was obviously I had no support from my family whatsoever. Dad would not give me a penny. And so I had to get a job and trying to work and go to school. And just with everything that leaving home at 19 years old and just not knowing anything about life, it was quite overwhelming. And, dad would always say that something like, you're going to be a man. There's no better time to start now. And that was his philosophy. Just walk out the door and shut the door behind you. You're done. Figure it out yourself. And that was kind of a hard pill to swallow. But the amazing thing now is, when I see these things and I see how my life progressed, I can see God's hand in all this stuff, which praise to him. You're thinking, how do you see God's hand in this stuff? Well, the main thing was that now me and my wife were only a half an hour apart. I mean, we were back together again, and that's really what I wanted anyway. And it wasn't, long before that times really got tough, and I got an opportunity. I was walking through a classroom one day, and in a hallway there was a billboard, and there was job postings, and there was a job for UPS, and I applied, and I got a part-time job. I think it was 2 in the morning till 8. Wasn't great, but it fit in with my classes. So it worked, but it wasn't nearly enough money. And it was the start of just a progression of moving forward, like I was talking about earlier. I was slowly moving forward. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was moving forward. And finally got to the point to where that wasn't enough. So I took a second job, still trying to go have classes. Just couldn't do that anymore. The debt was racking up. So then I dropped out of college, ended up with 3 jobs, was working from 2 in the morning to 8. The other one started at 9 to 5, and the other one started from 6 to 9.
Oof.
So for almost 2 years, I worked 3 jobs. One was at UPS, the other one was delivering Lazy Boy furniture, and the other one was cleaning out cages at a pet store.
Man.
That was 2 years of my life.
Whew.
And the only thing that kept me going was that I was close to Kathy. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have went through all that. But I wanted something better. I wanted what I seen in her father and her family. That's what I wanted. Didn't know how to get there, but I wanted that. And that just kept progressively getting better. But when you're working 3 jobs and you're working all those hours, you can only do that so long. You're just going to crash and burn. It's going to come. And I did. But when I finally did, I was just at the very beginning of the opportunity to go to UPS full time. And that made a big difference. The other 2 jobs are gone. My wonderful father-in-law helped me pay off my debt to my college, because I didn't realize that when you sign on the dotted line and you quit, they want their money like now.
Mhm.
There's no, wait a minute, I thought I had a couple years. Yeah, I didn't realize it didn't work that way. So there was a lot of issues and a lot of problems. But it was such an uphill battle for such a long time. And me and Kathy got married after she graduated. That was kind of the agreement with her father, that she was going to finish school. I wasn't going to mess that up. And after she graduated, we got married and just tried to start building a life together. And still, you got to remember, I'm not saved at this time. I'm still me, but I'm just doing everything I can to make things better. Whatever form that took, I'm doing things to make things better. So it didn't really start hitting me until my wife kept insisting, we're going to church. We're going to church. And I'm like, I thought we were done with this church thing, but okay, I thought we were over this.
If only you knew.
Only I knew. But it's amazing, honestly, how God uses people. And that was instilled in her so deeply that it got to the point where we went through the motions for quite some time, different churches, different things. And I would go and I would listen, but never really convicted of anything. I still didn't want to be there. Went to a Presbyterian church for a while, where things started to get a little better. I was starting to listen and understand things, I think because the pastor was better than most I've been there under. But that didn't, we were there for several years, but that really didn't move me in a direction that I wanted to go. But I was really starting to take the Lord seriously at that time. I was working through things. So the wonderful thing I've picked up on what Dana's been saying in the past, he said it several times the last couple of months, is the Holy Spirit always works in conjunction with his word. And I found that to be so true in my life, because really what it come down to was me sitting down with that book and wrestling with that book. There were things that I did not want to be true. There were things that I did not like. And I would get angry.
That sounds familiar.
I would put that book away. I would walk away from it, try to ignore it, do my thing. Of course, Kathy says we're going to church on Sunday. That didn't help. But, it's like the autonomy, the level of depravity in a person is incredible. You so much want what you want, even if it's something silly or just something that just makes you feel better, or just even leave me alone. Just that autonomy. It's so hard to get through. So the doctrines of grace just ring so true to me. And once you understand total depravity, I was it. I mean, I was, and we all were, don't get me wrong, at one time, but I understand that. And I think the reason I understand that so much is because I was not raised in a church family. I mean, sometimes there's been so many people I've come across in my life that go to church on a regular basis, but their lives are a mess. And you really wonder sometimes with some people, have you really bent the knee to the Lord? Have you really confessed to him and opened up your mind and your heart and just admitted that you're a hell-bound sinner and the wrath of God is hanging upon you, and just let it go? Because I mean, it's amazing to me that how clear some things are to me, but yet people that have went to church their whole lives ever since they can remember, some of these things just don't seem as clear. It's interesting, but that part of my life, it was a real struggle. There's no way around it, and the whole time I was running from God. In Romans 3 again, when there's not one that seeks God, no, not one. That resonated with me because that was me. And when I had the 3 jobs, I think the next line is, there is not one good, no, not one.
Right.
Well, in my mind, I was a good person. I was doing everything I could to provide a stable life, killing myself to provide a stable life. And I was also comparing myself to my father. And what he was, I was not. That made me good. When I come across Romans 3, Romans 9, these heavy-hitting passages, and I see that it says, there is none good, no, not one, I'm offended. I mean, because I am trying to be good. I think I am good. Where's the authority of this book to tell me that I'm not good? And it's
All over the place.
all over the good answer. But really, honestly, when you're constantly comparing yourselves to others and not the scriptures, you can fool yourself for a long time.
Yes.
A long time. And I did that. I mean, I never drank. I never did all these things that my father did. I never did a lot of things that my friends did. And I never understood why, really. But this is where Ephesians comes in powerfully. Ephesians 1, Ephesians 2, understanding that you were chosen before the foundations of the earth, that God had his hand on you. And when you start to understand these things and you look back, you realize it makes sense why that all these pieces just kind of fit into place and things didn't go nearly as bad as they could have went. And I just didn't run off the rails. I mean, I think God really had a purpose and a plan. And when you understand the doctrines of grace and you understand the five solas and you understand these things really deeply, and they're in your mind and in your heart, you really start to see that, yeah, he did choose me from the foundations of the earth. He thought of me even before time began. He set his love on me for what reason? Just because he wanted to.
Oh, I thought it was because he looked down the corridor of time and saw that you would believe, and then
Here we
he
go.
chose you
Well, yeah,
retroactively.
I wasn't gonna go there, but I'm
You don't
glad
have
you
to. You can
did.
forget
That's
I
okay.
said it.
Lee's always counted on to go there. We always know. He likes to get that one in there.
Well,
Zing.
Little
Yeah.
zinger there.
Yeah.
So when did it become when did it really hit home for you where you really experienced that heart change? How did you end up being finally drawn in by the Lord?
Well, there again, this was my wife, because I thought things were fine. You know, he's making more money. We were able to feed ourselves. We had bought a home, and you know, you that pride, you know, that selfish pride. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you look back and you're like, yeah, I'm not dad. I'm not you. I'm not you. I'm doing pretty good. And you know, it wasn't until one day that she just it was welling up inside of her for quite some time. And she just looked at me one day and she says, I just don't even know if you love me anymore. And there again, that idea of doing good things. I was doing everything I could to provide for my family. And that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But that's not a good thing if you're doing it through your own strength and your own self-willed power. And when I realized at that moment when she said that maybe I'm not such a good person.
Mm.
And then those things just really started resonating, what I've read, what I mentioned to you, Romans 3, Romans 9, Romans 5. I mean, Ephesians 1, Ephesians 2. It just goes on and on. Like Lee said, it's everywhere. And the pieces just started coming together. And I'm like, wow, okay. The one thing I've strived for since I was a teenager is telling me I'm blowing it. And I'm like, maybe I am. Maybe I am. You know, God uses people. And that was the wake up call. So that's also when we finally got into a solid church with a solid pastor and with a biblical man in my life that would actually sit down and open up the scriptures with you and explain to you and spend time with you and study with you. I mean, we're talking hours. I mean, this was months upon months into years. You realize that, yeah, I'm not the person I thought I was, and that I need Christ in a really desperate way.
Hmm.
In between my wife and a really solid man, that really was the turning point, and there was no going back after that. You know, you give your life to Christ, and even though he already had me, but it's just that self-willed depraved spirit is so hard to kill. And it was just an ongoing process with me, because I would read the scriptures and put the book away. I'd read this book, put it away. I would get angry at this and put it away. And that went on for a long time, Steve. That went on for a long time. You know, after that, there was a lot of learning. And as you grow in Christ, you also start to understand things in a much deeper way. And that became a really good blessing, but it also became a detriment at my previous church, because it was just, it was like two church worldviews, if you want to word it that way, Arminianism and Calvinism. If you just want to throw it out there, that's what it was.
Mhm.
There we go.
Yeah, if you want to call it that. It was as I was growing more and more in my faith and getting stronger and stronger in the Lord and understanding more and more, and you start to speak of these things, and people don't understand these things or don't want to hear these things. There again, you're on this collision course eventually. I mean, it's going to happen. And that was a real sad part of my life also, because you lose some friends that you were around for 15 years, and that was a tough time. And but you just stay true to the Lord, and you pray, and you work through these things. And at that point, I was leading a lot of the teaching in the church, and just very, very active. And it was just slowly building, and it came to a head one day, and we just mutually agreed that me and the pastor and a lot of other people, we just parted ways. And the following Sunday that I left that church, I walked into Logansville, because now this is the amazing transition. Church was so important to me. Before, I didn't care. I didn't care. But now, right after our church split, the very next Sunday, I knew I had to be in a church somewhere. And I knew the people that were counting on me also had to be in a church somewhere. So instead of, and that was a beautiful moment, honestly, because I fully realized at that moment how much God really meant to me, because that was not me for a long time. And now I have to be in church. It's not an option. I mean, it's just, and it's not like it's a routine duty. I got to do this kind of thing. I want to be there. I want to be under the word. I want to be with like-minded people. I want to hear the word preached. I need it. And that's really what brought me to Logansville, because I had knew enough at the time that there was a certain kind of church I was looking for now. And there wasn't really any. And I remember the first day that me and a group of others walked into Logansville, and and I talked to Dana later, and he said something like, "Who are all these people? Where did these people come from?" We're here to have church.
Yeah, it's happened a few times.
It's happened a few
with
times.
our church. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
but
like
it
somebody unloaded the bus out in the lot.
But that really was a moment for me that I realized how truly valuable a good, healthy, God-fearing, Bible-preaching, truthful church is. Because I had to have it. I wanted it. And it just wasn't an option to sit at home anymore. That was not on the cards. And I wasn't doing a TV preacher. That's not happening.
That's some
Not
good
the same.
discernment right there.
Yes. Good call. Good call.
Well, I kind of led you into that one, Lee. I thought you'd have something to say on that one. But
I've deployed my one joke for the episode, but I could reload
oh,
if
well,
you want.
let's see. It's not over yet. So I think this is really important and thank you for sharing this. I know this is very personal, but sometimes I think people who had a similar background and a similar story to you, if all they ever hear is I grew up in church, my parents had a godly marriage, and they took me every Sunday whether I wanted to go or not, and had a different sort of foundation, you can start to think that, boy, am I ever really going to be in the family the way some of these other people are? And we're a a spiritual family that believes that to be adopted is to be in the family indeed.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to make sure you could share your story. So if somebody's thinking, wow, this sounds awfully familiar, there's no reason to abandon hope if you just didn't have the kind of family situation that you ought to have had, or you just didn't get launched the way we would like a young person to get launched.
Yes.
Uh, don't abandon all hope.
Yeah.
No.
We want people to know that for sure.
No. The wonderful thing now is you realize that you know you have a seat at God's heavenly table waiting on you, and
Yes.
Right,
that's
right, right.
that's such a it overwhelms you with joy, and it brings peace, and there's such a heart of gratitude where before it was a just a heart of autonomy and pride. That's all it was. And just being a product of the world. I mean, and one other thing I will share with you quickly, because I just you guys know I'm trying to be more involved in the church. But the uh the enemy just never really wants you to start pushing in that direction again. And here lately, the spiritual warfare that has come with me has been interesting. I, I start hearing things in my mind like, you're too old to do this. You just recently retired. What are you doing? Why do you want to get back in the fight? Why do you want to get back involved in this? You've done your time in the trenches. Take it easy now.
Go
And
collect some seashells, you know?
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I think it might be Ephesians 6:18. You know, it talks about Satan and his fiery darts, his fiery arrows. That's what those things look like. Casting
Yeah.
doubt. It's being, you know, not confident in anything, just willing to sit on the sideline. And I think really reflecting on this and reflecting on my testimony and seeing where I've been and seeing where I am, and have such a wonderful, blessed family, a comfortable home, and all these things, and to be in a really great church. These are all blessings from God. And when you see that and you understand these things, how can I be too old to sit on the sideline and not share the gospel? I mean, just last week was my birthday. I'm 58 years young. I'm not old.
Happy birthday, youngster.
Happy birthday.
But it, it it's just another testament to how God works in your life. It's just I see the wonderful potential of this church. I see the growth of this church. I want to be part of it, and I want to help. And I want to help build a kingdom. And whatever form or shape that takes, I have no idea. But just you got to be part of it. That's the thing. And I think with, you know, some strong brothers like you and a strong church, that even when Satan starts to whisper in your ear and push you in another direction, this church, there's plenty of strong people to help bring you back, to talk to to pray with. And that's such a blessing at RBC.
Just one of
Yeah.
the many blessings and privileges of a local church and being members thereof.
Yes, agreed.
You can't get that watching a sermon on TV. It doesn't work that
Amen.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So.
mean, uh, I still don't understand how you do worship over a TV set. I mean,
Beats me.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, that's kind of where I'm at in my life right now, where I came from, and I'm really encouraged and looking forward to what God has in store for the months, years, and weeks, days, whatever to come.
Yeah, that's great. Well, again, thank you for kind of sharing your story. And if you are watching this and hearing this and you just didn't have a very godly upbringing, don't walk into that sanctuary and think, well, I'm sure everybody in this room did, because almost certainly that's not true. And
Not
there's
true.
probably a lot of stories that would sound very familiar
Yeah.
if you just knew them. We just have a tendency to assume, oh, everybody here, these are all children of pastors, every single one of them in the whole room, right? Or whatever.
Super
Like,
saints.
yeah, they're super Christians or whatever. And let me assure you, they are not.
They were dropped off
They're
at church this
Christians.
morning on a heavenly cloud that
Right,
came down and
exactly.
deposited them at
Yeah,
the
they
front door.
rode down the Shekinah light right into their seat. No, they did not. No, they did not. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I think Lee
Well,
has a question for us.
I
You have a
do.
question for us, Lee?
I'm fully prepared to bring a listener question for our consideration. So, here is the question from an anonymous listener. If angels typically begin their messages with "Don't be afraid," does that mean the initial natural human response is fear toward angels? If so, what about angels makes humans afraid?
This is good.
I,
This is good.
I'm so ready to tackle this, but I do not want to be first.
Well, so I'll jump in here, and then you guys can correct all my mistakes. I think we do know of sometimes when we don't get that reaction, that's because the angels are not recognized as angels. But in fairness to the question, I think we can set those incidents aside. Those are something else. Sometimes there are angels on the scene and they're just seen as human. And the Bible seems pretty clear about that, but that's clearly not what the question is talking about. It's talking about when someone sees an angel and clearly recognizes this is not a person, this is an angel, or this is some sort of dominion, power, spiritual, powerful being, whether they recognize it as something they would call angels or not. And I think to start with, I think we have to acknowledge our limited understanding of the angelic realm. Like there's some things that have been revealed to us, and we have a little peek behind the curtain, but I think there's quite a lot more actually, that is veiled from us. And so whatever is going on there, and we could pick out a few different incidents in scriptures, there's a couple right at the beginning of Luke, and you get that reaction. First thing they have to say is like, don't have a heart attack and die of fear.
Right.
I'm not here to kill you or whatever. You know, they don't say it. That's not a direct quote. You should read it yourself, but I'm giving the gist.
Is that the
okay?
message?
Yeah, that's not no. So don't quote me. Go to the source, primary source. Okay. So there is for certain something going on there, and it could be my theory of it, because I don't think we have a lot of detailed information, is maybe a couple things going on. One is that clearly there's an understanding that I have something before me that is otherworldly, and that's really disturbing. There's something that isn't like the people and animals and the carbon-based life forms that I'm used to dealing with. This isn't one of those, and that in and of itself is disturbing. And I also think it's fair to say that those in the angelic realm are vastly more powerful than us.
Yeah.
So in the same way, if you were in the polar bear display, or you were swimming with a great white shark, or something that could clearly so much more powerful than you are, could destroy you almost effortlessly. It's a normal human, universally, whether you are a saint or sinner, sheep, goat, we all kind of have the turn pale, oh my goodness, I feel unsafe. And so that's why you get the reassurance, like, I'm not here to kill you. I'm not, like, don't be afraid, to some
Right.
extent. I think that's
Yeah.
probably not a particularly satisfying answer to this question. And I'm going to turn it over to these guys to fully satisfy all your curiosity about angels.
Ron, what are your powerful thoughts on this topic?
Well, when I first read the question, I thought of the angel at the tomb of Jesus in, I think it's Matthew 28. And there's a description of the angel there. And I think it was lightning. He appeared as lightning and he was white as snow. But the thing that always struck me about that passage was he was sitting on the stone.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about lightning, I don't know what that angel could have looked like, but I was just in a thunderstorm the other day and there was a crack of lightning. It came down to the ground so fast I couldn't even see it, but I definitely knew it was there. I don't know how you look at an angel sitting on a stone that appears like lightning. That, I agree with Steve. That would be terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to describe that. And what even that looks like. I mean, lightning is not motionless, and this angel sitting on a stone appearing as lightning.
Yeah.
I mean, that in itself is terrifying, I would think. But yet the guards fell as dead men,
Mm-hmm.
and the two women were able to receive the message from this angel. And, angels are messengers. So I think when you have these encounters, if God wants you to hear his message, which he certainly does, he will enable the people to be able to withstand before these angels or to hear his message. And that's a comforting thought too. But I think the idea of being afraid is, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. I kind of flip flop it and put me in those shoes, and I would think I would probably be like the dead men. It's like, it's
Night night.
what, and Steve said it right. It's like otherworldly. I mean, how do you experience the otherworldly and it's right in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
starts to boggle the mind. But yeah, that was
Yeah.
what I would thought of, and it was also the same way when in the story of the shepherds. There again, you have these shepherds, but this angel has a message. So these shepherds are able to receive this message.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it says, he says, do not be afraid. I think if you were around and you weren't supposed to receive this message, I think you might fall like dead men.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, that's interesting. It's a really interesting question. It's a good question. And it's interesting to think about. But what are your thoughts, Lee?
Yes. So I would say people are naturally prone to fear. Even though we might, we're at the top of the food chain as the secularists like to describe us, but there's lots of things that scare us. We have imminent fears and we have more existential fears. So, like if a tarantula were to crawl across the floor of my office right now, I would be deadly afraid. And my apologies to Jasper uh, for making this weakness known. That would be one of his greatest pleasures. But anyway, it would not be for me. I would be petrified. And that's a small thing. That thing's not going to kill me, but it would just scare me at least half to death, maybe 3/4 to death. That's an imminent fear. That's something that's directly in front of me. So we're already prone to fearing things that are natural in our world, that could cause us harm or simply creep us out, whatever that case might be. But we're not only afraid of those kinds of things, we're afraid of like I said, existential fear, things that are outside of our normal experience that thus feel threatening to us. So exactly what you were saying, guys, about it's unnatural to meet a being like an angel, something that's completely not a person. It's another created thing like us, but on a totally different level. That's scary, and I think especially for sinful people, it's especially scary to meet a holy angel. Because you're not only faced with something outside of our world, you're faced with something who is not like you, who actually loves and obeys God while you are an enemy of God. Um, that's also partially why I think humanity has been prone to worshiping uh, um, fallen angels at different times in history. Yeah, it comes from outside. Those guys have come from outside. They're from elsewhere, but they are enough like us that yeah, it's made people comfortable enough to go enthrall to them. So having that sin connection with a fallen angel. But I do think in a standard way, angels are scary because they're not us. And we are afraid of things that are not us, whether they're big or small, whether they intend to do us harm or not. Um, that's just what happens when you're alienated from God. Everything's your enemy eventually.
Yep.
Anything
This is my
different
father's world,
is
after all.
feared, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, one of the reasons why these beings are different is because they are perfectly holy in a way that we are not. And so we're not big on that.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, as holy as a created being can be.
Right.
They
right.
are
They've
that.
been unstained by sin. If we're talking about a heavenly angel, they've never been corrupted or stained by sin. And we don't know anybody like everybody we look around and see. That's what I mean. We don't know anybody like that.
Nope.
So very foreign to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Therefore scary.
Yes. Yeah.
But great question. We're always happy to answer the questions that come in. We need more. We keep going through them, and
Keep sending them.
we're not at replacement rates yet. So keep sending them in. You can send them by email to the church office email in the show notes. And if you are so brave, you can submit questions in video or audio format, and we'll be
If
happy
you
to play
dare.
those.
Yes.
Yes. Go for the gusto. All right.
Be bold.
Fortune favors the bold, or whatever that old maxim was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gentlemen, any other thoughts or comments for the good of the order?
Well, I just once again thank you guys and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Ron. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Ron, it was great to have you. Really enjoyed hearing your testimony and what brought you here, how God used so many secondary means to bring you not only to himself, but then bring you ultimately to RBC. And so we're grateful to you for being so open to talk about it, and ultimately grateful to God for the work that he did in your story. So
Amen.
very nice. Would you like a blessing?
Less away, Lee.
Yes.
Well, I am absolutely happy to. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.